Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we are going to be talking about the upcoming meta in Battlegrounds. And this is going to be meta that again lasts for 2 weeks, as seems to be the norm going forward. And by the initial looks of it, it actually looks extremely interesting, but it will in fact pose dangers that lie beneath the surface. And let me explain that. So first things first, we have Sharpened Claws node, where slash through blocks, inflicting 5 stacks of bleed. Each bleed does 10% of attack over 3 seconds, 3-second delay before applying more stacks of bleed. What you need to know about this node is that it, well, number one, will have very nasty interaction with deep wounds, because these 3-second bleeds will all of a sudden turn into, well, 5.5-second bleeds or maxed out deep wounds, which, basically doubles the damage or potency. No, not potency, but the damage that you will end up taking from these bleeds. That is a major issue in itself. And abilities that reduce the duration of the bleed will not even help with the deep wounds increase. The interaction is something similar as to how Domino gets infinite parries in Realm of Legends, where Limber might reduce the original parry stand duration to basically nothing, but then there is that increased stand duration from the synergy that gets applied afterwards. And same thing here, for instance, if you use Future Ant-Man, you reduce bleed duration by 90%. So a bleed here would last 0.3 seconds, plus 2.5 seconds from deep wounds. So you'd still have basically the original amount of bleed duration here on you. That is obviously important, but there is even a bigger thing that a lot of people forget about deep wounds specifically. And deep wounds will in fact manifest a major advantage into the players here. And it is pretty much going to be a must-run mastery, in my opinion, because bleed debuffs of your champions last, well, at the 4th rank 2 seconds longer, the 5th rank 2.5 seconds longer. If they have more current health than their opponent, bleed debuffs inflict an instant bleed, dealing 1% of opponent's max health as direct damage. A lot of people forget about this part. But if you put this together, in Battlegrounds, your opponent will almost always have more health than you do. And inflicting 5 bleeds on you will result in a 5% burst of direct damage, as in 5% instant bleed. And then obviously the longer bleeds. So if your opponent's running max deep wounds, a lot of champions that would otherwise be very good will, well, be a bit less good. Because if you rely on parry there, that is going to be a problem. Then to break down the rest of the nodes, they're fairly simple. We have Reinvigorated Unblockable. Every time a regeneration buff or passive is activated, if the defender is not heal blocked, they gain a Dormant Vigor charge. Once they reach 10 charges, they are consumed and the defender gains a passive unblockable for 5 seconds. So if you do get 10 regen effects, passive or buffs, defenders can go unblockable for 5 seconds. Not the biggest deal in the world in most matchups. But we also have personal space regeneration. Whilst the attacker is close to the defender gains a regeneration buff every 3 seconds, regenerating 0.5 of their max health each second. Staying far away from the defender causes these regeneration effects to gradually fall off. So this is one of those nodes, again, with relatively annoying wording, because we do not know exactly the time needed to stay off, and it works basically similar as long distance relationship node that we have had. If you're going to be super aggressive, opponents can start stacking regens, and the regen is going to go through the roof. Obviously, Battlegrounds will provide a way to weaponize this regen as well via Mystic Champions and via Regen Reversal Champions. Now, all of that put together, what I think will happen in the upcoming meta, because we have a ton of champions, and which champions are the ones that to watch out for. Well, to start off in Science class, number 1 is going to be Anti-Venom. Because Anti-Venom gains a regeneration passive every single time he's hit with a non-critical hit. And he's going to be unblockable a lot. So Anti-Venom is going to be one of those champions you do want to get a very, very precise counter for, because 2 combos in the fight or 3 combos in the fight, he will go unblockable. On top of it, you will also be able to use Anti-Venom offensively due to the Petrify debuff that he has on his level 1s, and also his Clintar debuffs, where he can get more Spectres on. So if you remain mega aggressive, avoiding opponent hitting your block much, or at all, ideally, you will be able to reverse regeneration quite efficiently, and he's going to be kind of like a dual threat champion. Definitely something to look out for. I think in science class, also Cassie Lang is going to be an excellent attacker, because she is going to completely shut down all the healing with her Power Sting debuffs that will remain on the opponent the entire fight duration. And then you can easily play Cassie Lang without parrying and without opponent hitting your block, because of her heavy attack and him particles and her shrinking down. So I do think Cassie is going to be a very good attacker. Other than that, we have Hulk. Again, you will need to be careful to not get touched in your blocks or rely on intercepts and a bit of aggro play. But once you do land in your level 1, you can place some debuffs on the opponent, switch off their regen or out damage it, and just nuke them down. And moving on, Scorpion, I think is going to be a very, very solid champ. He does like to parry, and my kind of like gut feeling is that in vast majority of the cases here, I will end up being super aggressive with Scorpion, let opponent regen quite a bit initially, take some bleed damage myself, and then drop that level 2 with that Petrify. It isn't super potent, but in between that and Despair, you can basically reverse opponent's regen slightly, do extra damage, and regen any bleed damage that you have taken. So I think Scorpion is going to work quite well. And Titania as well, because in between her indestructibles being able to absorb some of the bleed damage that you will end up taking, and then once you do get level 3, basically everything's going to be dead if they again have those regen buffs active. So probably you will want to remain super aggressive, let those regens build up, then drop level 3, and they're going to immediately drop dead. Moving on to skill class, where we have more interesting interactions, and these nodes will provide a lot of very fun and interesting stuff. Baron Zemo is the first standout, that champion that I will end up taking Trunk for, primarily because of this meta. And the reason why Baron Zemo is going to be an absolute menace is going to be very simple, because he starts each fight with 5 cleanse passives, and then you're going to parry stun once, and then you're going to root your opponent, and you're going to inflict a ton of debuffs, so you're going to be able to offset their regen for the remainder of the fight. You're going to be well on your way to level 2 after parrying once. Yes, you will take that burst of 5% damage still, but after that, you basically will have kind of like a surefire road to victory. Maybe you will need to parry again after 20 seconds. For 20 seconds, you do wish to avoid that parry when you do not have the cleanse charges. But in between, being able to root opponents from the very first parry in the fight to obviously rooting them with your level 2 further, I do think Zemo is going to be a quite significant threat to work with. And moving on, Crossbones with similar idea. If you do have a high sig Crossbones, taking a single parry will apply 5 bleeds to you. And there, at a high sig, there will be a solid chance that you will get to start with quite a few Furies initially, and then you just kind of want to be aggressive. I think with Crossbones, it's going to be kind of like a race of how much health do you lose and how quickly you dispatch the opponent. Would be significantly more effective in the previous scoring system, but I think he will function fine in this one as well. Mole Man with similar idea. Every parry will place 5 bleeds on you, and that is going to generate monster mass for you. So with 2 parries, you're going to get 10 monster mass from that. Basically, you want to parry heavy like twice, and you're going to be up to 18 monster mass. And past that point, you probably just want to activate level 1. You're going to be at 20 monster mass then, and then you just want to start nuking into the opponent. Kingpin, similar thing. 1 parry, he's immediately going to basically get into his overpower, as long as you have him at least at 65, I think. And Kingpin's damage output is just going to go through the roof. Kingpin also will have the added benefit of having some healing to offset that burst of deep wounds damage that you will take at the beginning. I think Kate is going to work very well due to her evade on parry, basically, and then her ability to hit that block and pause pause there, cold snap, and stuff like that. There is a worrisome factor of regen, but I do think she can play around that well enough. So we're going to see how she works out, but I think it's going to be quite solid. Havoc is going to have a very cool interaction there as well. So we're moving on to the Mutant class, because with Havoc we have the Plasma buildup, and if made to bleed, puts a Plasma buildup on the opponent. So after your first parry, your opponent's going to automatically gain these 5 plasmas, so you can just go parry, heavy, and then build up to level 3, and they will have, 5 plasmas on them. That pretty much is going to shut off any regeneration, regardless of how aggressive you are. And then you just run to your level 3 and try and nuke everything pretty much. So I think Havoc is going to be very solid. Storm is probably going to be one of the most explosive nukes that if you do have a highly ranked Storm, you're probably going to love using her in next meta, more than likely. Maybe I will end up eating my words, but with Storm, we have every time she gains a bleed effect, gain 2 prowess buffs. So once you parry, Storm gets 10 prowess effects, all of whom are 20% special attack damage increase. So from a single parry, she will gain, semi-permanent, because if you land in your heavy attacks, you can pause them. Semi-permanent 200% special attack increase, and then obviously if you parry again a bit later, you can get another 10 prowess effect. Omega Red is a champion that I am not super sold on, and this is one of those things that I wanted to shout out, because you also need to keep in mind the regeneration of opponents. And the vast majority of the champions that I talked about here, I believe Storm will be able to basically outdamage that regen, and she doesn't need to be super aggressive, as aggressive. Havoc has the debuffs, Kingpin I think will be able to outdamage it with like big bursts, and so will Crossbones, because those Furies are massive. And then we have Zemo, who will rely on Despair, we have Titania to reverse it, and all of the other Science champions to reverse it. And then with Omega Red, he's a champion that will require you to stay in your opponent's face all the time, so opponent will be gaining a lot of regen and quite fast. And the question there is, whether Omega Red will have the damage to push through the regen, assuming that, you pretty much always will be close to the opponent. And the important thing is why Omega Red worked against long distance relationship meta like that was because you don't really rely on his hit damage, you rely more on spore damage, and he didn't, suffer from the weakness. But here, it's not quite the same case, where, quite simply, if the regen damage takes away from your spore, if the regen amount takes away from your spore damage, it will immediately slow down Omega Red quite a bit. And it will definitely be quite interesting to see whether Omega Red will be able to run through champions in next meta, or it's going to be quite a bit trickier than that. A champion that I think will be able to run through opponents very fast is going to be Colossus. At this point, I really wish my Colossus was rank 4, because Colossus obviously gains his armor ups whenever his immunities activate, and then they have a chance to go into permanent armor ups after the expiration of that. And with his parry heavy playstyle, staying relatively far away from opponent for a significant portion of the fight, opponent should not be getting too much of a regen, and his damage is just going to go through the roof. It really, really will. And then level 2s, if you have Gambit Relic, will absolutely demolish. So yeah, if I had Gambit Relic at like 6-star level, or even like, high 5-star level, I would rank for my Colossus right now, because I do think you will want that Gambit Relic for those, huge crit rates. I think Domino is going to be a quite big weapon offensively, so to speak, because whenever she gets inflicted with a bleed effect, she has a 50% chance to purify that bleed after 1 second. And if she does, she gains a bunch of power instantly. So, again, one more champion that will take damage from the Deep Wounds burst, but is probably going to be significantly more fast and aggressive than others. Tech class, I could show a ton of champions that will work great. I think Warlock is going to be phenomenal, shutting off the regen. Only thing to worry with Warlock in this meta will be if opponent has like an already active buff, then your infection duration is going to be very, very short. So you do need to keep that in mind, because those regens will be actual buffs, and that doesn't help Warlock much. Lady Deathstrike It's going to work phenomenal. You have easy access to heal block. If you parry, yes, you will take some damage, but you also will end up regening some of that back. And obviously, she has a playstyle that, urges you not to block as is. Then we have Nimrod. Opponents getting regen in every fight is going to make Nimrod significantly more valuable. Omega Sentinel is going to work extremely well too, in my opinion. Every time she gets bleed inflicted on her, you're going to be getting those regeneration effects, and she has access to a very, very good heal block, so that's going to be great. And Ghost is just going to be insane. Ghost is basically going to be perma-banned. That's what's going to happen. Because, yeah, you cannot... Ghost is going to be... If you do not ban Ghost, you're going to lose a round type of situation, because when you're going to parry... When Ghost is going to parry, then you're going to gain 5 bleeds, and then you're going to phase, and then those 5 bleeds are going to turn into 5 massive fury passives that will give her a ton of attack, and on top of it, you're going to have your guaranteed crit. So yeah, Ghost is going to be just stupid. Without a doubt. Now, future Ant-Man, I'm not super sold on him. He does have incoming 90% duration reduction from the bleeds, but again, as I said, deep wounds is still going to bypass this bit. And then he does gain his regen up to max 3% of missing health, but this is missing health, and you can take 5% burst basically upon your parry. And other than that, he also doesn't have a way to deal with healing. So I'm not super sold on future Ant-Man, but figured I could bring it out here because it's worth mentioning. He could, or it's one of those things that definitely needs to be tested, is what I'm trying to say. CGR is going to be an absolute menace because he is fully bleed immune, so he doesn't have to worry about all of those deep wound shenanigans. And obviously he has access to debuffs with Despair that will shut down opponent's healing, and then also Damnation debuff is going to nullify those regions, and he has ton of damage. So yes, CGR is going to be crazy good, for sure. Null, I think, is going to be great too, because whenever you do bleed, he does take significantly less bleed damage, and on top of it, he does have access to regeneration to recover it. And also, if your Null is awakened and high sig, while corruption is active, if the opponent has 50% health or less when they would gain regeneration effect, replace it with Null's degeneration debuff is just going to be like a cherry on top. And obviously all those debuffs will shut down regen. So I think Null is going to be another force to be reckoned with in this meta. Hulkling, I think, is going to function well enough because of the fact that he can gain openings with his unblockable, and the fact that you do not necessarily need to be super aggressive, and you can take a step back. So I think Hulkling is going to work just fine. And here we have a secret, well, maybe not necessarily secret, but I am very suspicious that this man here is gonna run rampant for next 2 weeks. Again. And for those of you who do not see, the interaction there is also like very straightforward. These buffs are actual buffs. Opponent gains them every 3 seconds as you stay close. So basically you just need to make sure that opponent has about 4 regions active when you start your stun loop, or even not as much. Basically get to 1.9 bars of power, and then drop your level 1. It will have that guaranteed stun. It lasts for 2.6 seconds. Limber is going to reduce this duration, but as long as they have at least 1 buff, this Sig ability is going to offset that. And then you just start spamming your level 1s, and they're going to be stunned forever. And yes, they're going to regen more, but with every regen buff, your damage output will also increase. And it is going to be quite interesting to see whether Ronan's Mega Cheese damage output will outpace the regen fast enough. It is something that I definitely want to test, but I do have a suspicious feeling that he will probably do well enough. So, keep note on that. If opponent drafts Ronan against you, you should at the very least be wary of a possibility of a stun loop. Then in Mystic class, I think if you have a high level Black Widow Clairvoyant, she's going to perform extremely well, being able to nullify and put on the buff immunity on all of those regions, and then every time she parries, she would trigger her immunity, and whenever her immunities are triggered, each time she or her opponent are immune to any effect. So yes, every time you parry, you will gain 5 charges, and you will gain 20% of her max power, so she's going to get level 2 very, very quick. And yeah, definitely keep a note of that. Juggy is just going to run through everything like he often does. There's absolutely no reason for Juggy not to work, really. He's definitely a champion that does not rely on, parry openings, and he can nullify. So yeah, Juggy is going to be an absolute menace. I think Hood is going to be exceptionally good as well, because you're going to be able to consistently fate seal those regens, and your level 2 is going to, you're going to be able to stagger those regens, then level 2 is going to fate seal them. You're going to be able to steal and regen back any health that you do end up losing due to the bleed node. Plus your phasing will provide you with extra openings. So yeah, I do think Hood is going to be quite crazy. When it comes to the rest of the Mystics, it is going to be quite tricky as well. I know a lot of people wanted to point out Absorbing Man. I'm not super sure Absorbing Man is going to work as well, because he needs to remain very aggressive, and he has no way to offset that regen. And then, we have a bunch more champions like Tigra. I think, obviously, Tigra can work if you're very, very skilled with her, but often, most kind of basic level of Tigra gameplay typically will involve you, parrying and blocking and baiting out opponents' heavy attacks, which is going to be very punishing. So I'm not super sold on Tigra, especially if you're not extremely confident with her. So it is going to be interesting which Mystic champions kind of function the best. But overall, you guys, at this point, have seen my predictions, early thoughts on the upcoming meta. I know that I'm definitely taking my Zemo up. I know that I'm going to be, relying on most of the champions that I featured in this video, and a handful of others. I do not think Human Torch is going to work well, just to point that out there, because not only Human Torch, needs that blocked contact quite a lot, and that is going to do significant amount of damage if opponent has deep wounds, but also bleeds reduce his duration of incinerates and no flames as well, I believe. So I don't think that's gonna function extremely well. I think Archangel is gonna be possible, but extremely RNG reliant. I do think that, not initially, I doubt I'll put Archangel in my deck. And yeah, it looks like it is going to be very interesting meta, but definitely do not forget to max out your deep wounds if you have them, because then anything that isn't completely bleed immune will take 5% damage on blocking a hit instantly. So yeah, that will be quite significant, I would say. Let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you guys soon. Bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about